Hello, for this interview, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Charles Vincent, a professor of psychology here at Oxford. His work focuses on understanding how healthcare can become safer in hospitals, community settings, in the NHS, and in other healthcare organizations. I'm looking forward to chatting to Charles about his academic path and experiences. To start things off, Charles, could you tell us a little bit about where you grew up?
I grew up in the suburbs of London. My father was a businessman, and my mother, was common in those days, stayed at home and was a sort of housewife, if you like. And unlike many people, my childhood really must very straightforward and happy and largely free of trauma, except those usual growing up experiences.
Right. And so how did you go from, growing up in the suburbs of London, having parents that weren't necessarily in the field to then getting into psychology, and how has your career developed since you first got into psychology?
Yeah, it's true. There was nobody in my family who was in medicine or psychology or anything. And I actually went up to university to read mathematics. And that's how I started. I think, like a lot of people in psychology, seem to have started somewhere else. And I did mathematics for a year. And I did it astonishingly badly in my first year exams and wanted to change course. And this wasn't initially permitted. And then
Mhm.
through the kindness of tutors who found out I was looking to do another degree, I managed to move into psychology and philosophy. And that's how it started. I don't remember exactly why I wanted to do that. I probably had rather romantic notions of what it was to be a psychologist.
Mhm.
That was the beginning. And I did the psychology degree, and then I did a year of as a nursing assistant where I had to kind of grow up a bit rather rapidly and suddenly take responsibility for people. And then I did clinical psychology training after that, along with some of the other people in the psychology department in Oxford.
That's really interesting to go from a mathematics background and then transition. So, I know that you've said in the past that you first got into psychology, and then how did you get into more kind of clinically focused stuff?
After I was a clinical psychologist for a bit, and I did all kinds of things for some years, got interested in other things and drifted away from being a psychologist and generally a bit of a muddle. And then I did a PhD, and at the time I had about 5 jobs. I was in my mid-30s by that time, so I'd spent a long time not being a psychologist, if you like. And I needed a job, and I got a job on a project called Avoidable Mishaps in Medicine in University College. And
Mhm.
this was a light term for looking at medical disasters. And that's what started me a long time ago on working on the safety of what we now call the safety of healthcare, patient safety. And when I was at University College, I got a job there as a lecturer and also in the medical school. And I set up a little research unit to look at clinical risk, the risks of if you're a patient or when you go into hospital, you have risks from the disease, if you like, and from the operation. But you also have risks of just things going wrong and human error. And we looked at methods of sort of accident analysis and how often things went wrong and things like that. And this led eventually to me moving in to Imperial College and to work in surgery and cancer. And then I worked in the hospital, and I had a lot of reasons for going there, but one was to see whether all this psychology stuff and thinking about safety, well, what was it going to be like to actually work with the surgeons and the nurses, the anesthetists, and would the ideas sort of play out? And I think they do.
That's great to hear. So, after experiencing maybe numerous different aspects of psychology and medicine, I'm sure you've learned a lot. Do you have any advice for others that has served you well?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I think others in this series have talked about the long term. And I think the first time I thought about a couple of things. One is that my career has been pretty haphazard. And I think for a long time I thought that was just me. But actually, when you're young, you look up and everyone seems to have followed this very organized path. And I think largely it's not true at all. And a lot of people bounce around from doing different things, and realizing that's helps. And you've got to try things before you know whether they like them. The other thing I think I've thought that I believe when I was younger, that kind of people were very clever, who were great researchers, and they knew what they were doing. And Actually, even now when I'm doing it, sometimes I do routine projects and they just trundle along. But if I do anything at all that's a bit challenging or a bit unusual, I'm always confused. It's too difficult. There are too many variables. I don't know. It's probably a stupid idea to start this in the first place, and all these things. And now I often talk about that with people I work with because I remember being worried about being confused. And now I think it's just part of being a researcher is to be confused. And you've got to develop a tolerance for that and not worry about it.
Certainly. Thanks so much for sharing about your path and your experiences and for giving that advice.